Biggest takeaway from the college football semifinal on Saturday for you was what?
The game stunk again. I think this is 8 of the last 10 where it's been decided by 20 points or more again. So it's kind of frustrating when you see semifinals. I guess it's hard for me to sit here and talk about expansion and listen to everybody talk about expansion all this time when you have games that have been very lopsided in the college football playoff. But the cast of characters that we're used to seeing are now here at the end of the season with Alabama and with Clemson. But it was a rough weekend. It was not a very competitive semifinal. I think it leads to a lot of questions that a lot of people will have about who gets in the future and who they can depend on. I think this makes it easier next year or the future to put in a team like Georgia where you know what you're going to get because you just saw it, as opposed to maybe somebody that's undefeated or somebody that you thought was deserving because of what they've done or because of what the resume said.
So stay there for a second, Pollack. When you think about that, in your mind, did the committee get it right this year? I mean, should it have been this way, or should Georgia have been in?
Well, I mean, if you're saying the 4 best teams, it's easy to point at it now and say Georgia. I think there's a lot of us, me and Kirk, were talking about it on, Selection Sunday, that you knew Georgia was one of the 4 best teams. They also had a bad loss to LSU that prevented them from being there. I think maybe this changes the thoughts in the future. How about Notre Dame? I think they're going to be a team that now, I think 0-6 in New Year's /BCS /playoff games in their last 6, and they've all been beatdowns, that very uncompetitive ball game. So I think it gives the committee an excuse in the future now. It gives them a reason to keep out, non-teams in a conference that might have a little bit of question to them, or maybe there's something to them they go, I don't know for sure. I think this gives them the ammo now to pull the trigger in the future.
So, David, hang tight for a second. I want to ask you guys at the table. Bobby, did the results of the semifinal prove in your mind that things need to change?
Well, and David hit on it. I think that there were 2 probably worthy teams in there. So we talk about expansion. Maybe it's time for contraction a little bit. But I do think if you expand it, you get in a team like Georgia, and you get to maybe to see them to play Clemson, or maybe they play Alabama. Maybe you throw in Ohio State, who was playing as well as anybody at the end of the year. Like, those are the 2 teams that I looked at that said, hey, they have the talent and the ability, not necessarily to beat maybe a Clemson or Bama consistently, but they have the ability to get it done. And we've seen it happen in the past, and we've watched these teams play good football.
But the line has to come in somewhere. And I'll say this, we constantly have the best or most deserving argument. I don't think it's that. I think they need to find the best of the most deserving. At some point, don't wins and losses have to matter? I mean, do we want to live in a world where losing to Alabama in the SEC championship in a close game means more than a win?
No, absolutely. And that's the thing you try to debate. Just because you're one of the best, that can't absolve you of a loss. And Georgia lost to LSU. Ohio State got beat up by Purdue. Like, those things can't disappear. But they're playing the best football at the end of the season. And that's what's unfortunate, is they probably would have been better matchups. But Notre Dame won other games against a schedule that you looked at historically would have been pretty tough.
So you open it up to 8, and maybe you make most programs happy, right? You got the deserving teams that go through their season perfect, and you got the teams that people think are better matchups for the best teams.